Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda and this is my channel, Her Pacific Northwest Washington Life, and today I wanted to share with you my April wrap-up. So the whole month of April I participated in the OWL Magical Readathon, which is a month-long readathon hosted by G over at Book Gross, and this is the third year that we were doing the owls. So all of the books I read fit into the different course prompts, and I think the way I'm gonna do this is by going alphabetical order down the course list and tell you what book I read, what format I read it in, the time or the page count, and the star rating. And then at the end we'll do all of the stats for the month. So the first book I read was for the prompt of Ancient Runes, and this was supposed to be a book that had either a heart on the cover or in the title. And for this, I read Hearts of Resistance by Soraya M. Lane. This is a book that I listened to on Audible, and it was 10 hours and 7 minutes, and I gave it a 3-star rating. I picked up, I think last year, probably 4 or 5 books by Soraya M. Lane on Kindle and Audible because they were priced so well, and I believe the majority of what she writes is centered around World War I or World War II. So this one was a World War II based story that followed 3 different women during the war. And they all played different parts. They had differing storylines. So we had a woman, I think her name was Sophia, from Berlin. We had Rose from France. And then we had Hazel from England. And they all have differing storylines, but one main goal, which was to help kind of infiltrate the Nazi plan and mess up what they had going on so that they could aid in the Allies winning the war. And their storylines did come together. It was an interesting storyline. You follow people who are helping the Jewish people get out of the country, out of like Germany occupied France and out of Berlin itself. You also have a girl who is learning to listen to the radio and decipher codes and know like when the Allies are going to drop weapons in a certain area for the like rebel forces and stuff like that. So I thought it was interesting, though I do feel like it's kind of a redundant story, and I do understand that this is what happened during that time. I just don't feel like it gave me a very new perspective on what was happening during World War II, especially in mainland Europe. So that way it was just a 3-star rating for me. Overall it wasn't bad, but I don't think it's the best World War II based book I've read either. The next prompt was Arithmancy, and this was a book that had the magical property of 2, or a book outside of your comfort zone. So for this I read, I've got it right here, Vampire Knight Volume 5 by Matsuri Hino. My favorite genre is fantasy, so this kind of fits in still, but something I'm still getting used to is mangas, and this is only the 5th manga that I've ever read, so still pretty new with it, but overall not bad. I initially decided that this was going to be the manga I was going to jump into and learn to read, because I think at Half Price Books there were the first 4 volumes for $2 on clearance, so I figured it was a good way to jump in since they were such an affordable price. And I know that mangas can tend to be a bit pricey for what they are, just how quickly they are to read and things like that. So this one was 195 pages. I gave it a 3-star rating just like the rest of the mangas. We follow Yuki Cross, and she is the daughter of the headmaster at this school, where there's a day class and a night class, and she is a guardian, which means she protects the day class from finding out that the night class is 100% vampires and stuff like that. There's also this character named Zero in here who is the other guardian, and he knows about the night class as well, and there's kind of like a little love triangle and just other things that go on within this. So I was glad to be able to just progress the story a little further, and I'm happy to be jumping into more of the mangas here soon. But I think it's fun. There's also a Netflix anime. I don't know if it's a Netflix original, but I know the anime series is on Netflix. So I would like to get a little bit further in this manga before I jump into the anime and see what that's all about. So we'll see how that goes. The next prompt is astronomy, and this was to attend a night class or read a book that you read mostly during the night. So for this, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. No, I didn't. I read A Court of Frost and Starlight, which was a buddy read with my friend Darshell over at Books and Planners. I read this on my Kindle, and it was a 239-page ebook that I gave a 2-star rating. This is the book. It's a short novella that bridges the original trilogy with the books that Sarah J. Maas is now writing. And I don't feel like it added anything new to the story from what the original trilogy did. And I get that it is a novella, so it doesn't really have the time to do that. But I feel like it could have done a lot more. This takes place around the winter solstice, so kind of around Christmas time. And it obviously follows the group after the events of A Court of Wings and Ruin and the war that has happened and how that has impacted each member of the group. And what I liked was that we got chapters that followed different perspectives from what we normally get, because usually we only get to read from Feyre and Rhysand's perspectives. And I was hoping that with these new perspectives we would get more character development, but it just didn't really happen. So that was a bit of a letdown. But overall, I think it was good because it didn't leave off on a cliffhanger or anything, so I don't feel like I need to know what happens next. I think it'll be interesting to find out what happens next, but it feels like it wrapped it up nicely, so that way I'm okay waiting, essentially. The next course was Care of Magical Creatures, and this was a hippogriff study, so the prompt was to read a book with a creature with a beak on the cover. And for this, I read Rebel Spring by Morgan Rhodes. Right here, I didn't fix my stack before I started filming, so there will be a lot of adjusting. But this is the second book in the Falling Kingdom series. It was actually the last book I finished at 401 pages, and I gave it a 3-star rating. This was a reread for me. The first 4 are rereads for me because when I originally picked up the series, the last 2 weren't finished. That's why. So I felt like I needed to do a reread of these before I read the last 2, just to have a refresher of what happened and what our characters are doing and things like that. I remembered major plot points, but not a whole lot. I remembered a lot of the beginning of the story, but I quickly learned that I forgot a lot of things that happened at the end. But basically, we follow 3 character points of views in this. We follow Magnus, who is the Prince of Limeros. We follow Cleona, who is the Princess of Oranos. And we follow Jonas, who is a rebel from the country in between called Palsia. And Prince Magnus's father has decided that he wants to rule over all of Mythica, which is the 3 lands combined, and it ensues from there. So obviously that means that the other 2 lands have been conquered, with Cleo being a princess. You kind of know what that means, and so it's just following them as there's this new world being built and these new laws being enforced and things like that. There's a lot of magic in this. It's elemental magic, and basically we're following that as well. We follow what happens in just the kingdoms and also what happens with the Watchers and kind of how they're manipulating events and things and people to get what they want. So I don't know exactly what that is since I haven't finished the series, but I'm glad that I was finally able to get into the second book so that way I can continue on with my reread. So yeah, well, I remember having much stronger feelings towards the characters and the events when I read this the first time. And now I just feel like everything's so rushed and like I'm not having that time to build up my feelings and emotions. So I don't really know what I was thinking before. I thought these were really good. But now they're just kind of eh. And maybe that's just because I'm a little older, but who knows. The next prompt was charms, and this charm in specific was Lumos Maxima. So the prompt was to read a book with a white or mostly white cover, and for that I read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This was an audiobook for me that was 24 hours and 39 minutes that I gave a 4-star rating. This is the first book in the Mistborn series. It's the first book in the first era, and it was the book slated for April for the Cosmere read-along. So this is only my second foray into Brandon Sanderson's whole Cosmere. I read Elantris in last month, I think it was. And so I was interested because it seems like Mistborn series is a lot of people's favorites. And I liked it. I really enjoyed the world building and the time that Brandon Sanderson put into describing the magic system and things like that. I like the characters. This was not at all what I thought it would be. I kind of thought that we would mostly be following a male main character. I didn't know that we would be following Vin, who's a 16-year-old girl, and that it wasn't just going to be kind of battling and all that other stuff. There was lots of court and political intrigue with this as well, which I really enjoyed, the nice balance between the two. So I'm really looking forward to just growing this story more and seeing what else happens with the characters, and just learning a lot more about the Mistborns and how the metals are utilized and what people can do with those. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. I also feel like for being a fantasy book, and I classify this as adult fantasy, even though Vin's only 16, it could be young adult or adult, but I think it's more adult. I feel like if you're new to the genre, this is really good because it does build up the world so much that if you're not used to reading fantasy or learning about magic systems, that this is a good kind of jumping into point if you would like to get into the genre. So I really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else the books have in store for me. So the next prompt is Defense Against the Dark Arts, and this was what was this in specific? Grindylows, that's what the study was. So this was to read a book set at sea or on the coast, and for this I read Salt to the Sea by Readathon, and this was an audiobook for me that was 8 hours and 47 minutes that I gave a 4-star rating. I also think this might have had an impact for Hearts of Resistance for me, since both of these are World War II paced books that follow different points of views. But in Salt to the Sea, we follow 4 main characters. This was the second book I read for the month, so it was a while ago at this point. We follow Joanna, who is a Lithuanian girl living in East Prussia, or maybe not East Prussia, but in Prussia in general, who I believe is a German citizen. We follow Alfred, who is a German boy and part of the Nazi Party, and he's a soldier. We follow the other two, whose names, Amelia, I think, is one of them. She is a Polish girl, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, but he, I believe, is also a German boy. So they all have their own different backstories and pasts and things like that. Lots of revelations, but basically it's them trying to survive, them trying to get out of where the Russians are invading at this point and get to safety. So a lot of secrets and things like that going on. And I just felt like this is really just a good story. I thought it was an interesting point of view. Getting to read from four people's points of views and seeing how four people experience the war while having the same experiences or very similar experiences. So I thought it was good. It's the only Readathon book that I've ever read, so I'd really like to read more from her. But I think this was a good one to start off, since I do have, or I have read a lot of World War II based books, so I do have that kind of framework and knowledge already built up. The next book is Divination, and this one was The Third Eye. So the prompt was to assign a random number generator to your TBR and read the book that it showed up. Instead of doing my whole TBR, I did a stack of 10 books because there's specific books I wanted to read. And I didn't want it to land on books that I wasn't ready to read just yet. So they were all books that would have continued series for me. And the book that this one landed on was The Plastic Magician. I'm going to do this one and Herbology at the same time. So Herbology was Mimbulus Mimbletonia, which was to read a book with M on the cover. And I read The Master Magician, which is the third book in the Plastic Magician trilogy, and the Paper Magician series. And Plastic Magician was the fourth book. So Master Magician was 224 pages on my Kindle, and Plastic was 233 on my Kindle. Both of these I gave a 3-star rating. I'm not entirely sure if this was originally supposed to be a trilogy and then there was a fourth book written, but the trilogy that ends with the Master Magician followed Sione and Emery and their stories. Sione is an apprentice to a paper folder, or a folder, which is a person who can manipulate and use paper magic. So it's set in London, just with magic, during 19 something or other, I think. And obviously, Master Magician being the third book, there's not a lot that I can say that isn't spoilery, but I really enjoyed the world. I thought it was nice to be rooted in our world, but also have just a unique type of magic system. I think it's really interesting that there are people who are folders and can use paper magic. There's smelters, which can use metal. There's Cypers, which can use rubber. There's gaffers, which can use glass. And there's the polymers. I don't think that's their name, but they can do plastic. So just kind of getting to learn a new magic system and things like that was really fun. Plastic Magician takes place just a couple years after Master Magician, and we follow a new girl named Alvy who's from Ohio, and she moves to London to apprentice under this guy whose last name is Praff, and Praff is the name of the magic school in London. So it's not where she went to school to become an apprentice, but she knows about its significance and things like that. And it's basically her helping Magician Praff formulate a new idea for this big convention that happens yearly for magicians, where they can bring like new ideas and things to the table, and lots of shenanigans happen, and it's just a really cute and fun series. I think if you, again, more like the urban fantasy setting, this might be for you, but I thought it was a lot of fun. The next course was History of Magic, and this was Witch Hunt. So to read a book that features witches or wizards, and for this I read The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was another buddy read for me, also a reread and part of the Lord of the Read-Along that's happening the beginning of this year. So in this, I guess I should start out. I did reread this as an audiobook, 16 hours and 40 minutes, and I gave it a 4-star rating. I never used to think that Two Towers was one of my favorites. Um, Probably because it's the one I've watched the least, and it being the middle, you kind of tend to forget about what happens in the middle. But the crew, the Fellowship, has split up, and Sam and Frodo are on their way to Mordor alone. Merry and Pippin have been abducted by orcs, and the rest of the people are deciding what they want to do, whether they go and help Frodo and Sam in their mission, which was the original mission, or whether they go and find Merry and Pippin and kind of create a distraction for Sauron so he doesn't know what's coming up. I just thought this was a lot of fun to reread and remember all of the events that happened. I also realized that Faramir, who has never really been one of my favorite characters, is a very like underrated character in this series, I feel like. And I just thought it was fun to be back in this world and reread. There's not much more I can say about this. I think at this point a lot of people have read the Lord of the Rings or seen the movies, and if not, they kind of have an idea of what this series is all about. But really, really enjoyed my reread of this, especially with my friend Rainey, and just having someone to chat with about. So, good book. The next prompt is Muggle Studies, and this was to read a book from a Muggle's point of view or a contemporary. And for this, I continued on with another reread, another series continuation, Gossip Girl by Cicely von Ziegler. This was a 200 and where is it? 201 page book that I gave a 3-star rating. These books are fun. They don't hold up well. There's a lot of girl hate and just a lot of like repetition and just not nice things that happen within this. We follow multiple main characters as well. We have this internet presence called Gossip Girl who kind of leads the story and tells the story of these rich, like Upper East Side prep school kids, as well as some not so rich West Side, also prep school kids, and their stories about love and growing up and things. So that's basically what it is. I stopped not even halfway through the series, and it's a series my mom bought for me a couple years ago for my birthday that I just wanted to finish, so I decided I would start a reread of it and see how far I can get. I also never finished the TV series, which I would like to, but I'd like to finish the book series before I do that, so that's why I read it. And it's nice and short, so it was really easy to get through. Alright, so the second to last prompt was potions, and this was a focus on the shrinking solution. So the prompt was to read a book under 150 pages. And for this, I read, this is not under 150 pages, but I read the 2 stories in the Salish system in here, which are The Emperor's Soul and The Hope of Elantris. And together those were 132 pages. So I didn't give this a star rating just because I haven't read everything that's in this collection here. But I really enjoyed, this was also part of the Cosmere read along, and I didn't get to it in March. So I read this at the beginning of April before I moved into the Final Empire, because these 2 stories relate to Elantris, especially obviously the Hope for Elantris or of Elantris. I thought The Emperor's Soul was really interesting, just learning about that sort of magic system and how, what was her name? Shay could create these soul stones to basically, they can kind of change you as a person, and make you like a different version of yourself. But the whole point of the Emperor's Soul was that there was an assassination attempt made on his life, and they didn't succeed, but they did put like an arrow through his head or something, which completely ruined his brain. And so there's a new brain in the Emperor's body, which is completely blank. And Shay was caught trying to steal a portrait, or not a portrait, a painting from one of the arbiters, is that what they're called? Offices, and she got caught. So she was supposed to be executed. And in return for her life, they knew that she had this magic where she could forge the Emperor's soul essentially onto this blank canvas and make it look like nothing ever happened to him. The assassination attempt was just a complete fail and all that other stuff. So that's the goal of it. I thought it was really interesting. We follow her for 100 days as she's given this task to try and reforge the Emperor's soul. But she also knows that she's not going to be let free after this because now she knows way too much. So it's also kind of her plan for escape after the what she's been tasked to do is over. So I thought it was really fun. I thought it was just a nice glimpse into more of the magic systems within the Cosmere and all that stuff. The Hope for Elantris, I thought it was a nice little story. It essentially follows a different character's point of view at during like the last battle scene in Elantris, and so it was nice to have just a viewpoint of what was going on within Elantris as this battle was going on, since we didn't really follow characters that were in the city when it was happening. But other than that, I don't think it added very much more to the story, but I think it was a nice little quick read anyway. And the last prompt is Transfiguration, and this was an Muggle study, so it was to read a book or a book within a series that features it's not transformation. Is it transformation? Shapeshifting, that's the word. And for this, I read the last book in the Aborzen or the Old Kingdom series. So this one is called Aborzen by Garth Nix. It was an audiobook that I listened to that was 11 hours, 13 minutes, and I gave it a 3-star rating. I think that's what I've given every book in this trilogy. And it just wrapped up really nicely. So we follow Lyriel and Sam as they are trying to find Sam's friend Nick. And this guy named Hedge, who has this big plan to bring this, it's not a demon, but it's just this really powerful entity that's trying to be released from these hemispheres that it's been trapped in. So their Hedge is using Nick to, because Nick's kind of like a sciencey smart guy, he's using him and his knowledge of things to break the, I don't remember if it says what it's called, the Destroyer, out of these hemispheres. So we follow characters that we already knew from the second book. You've got Lyriel and her disreputable dog, which can shapeshift, and you also have Sam and Mogget, and Mogget is a demon that is bound in the form of a cat, but this cat can also transform into, well, it's got many different forms it can take. One that it hasn't taken in a while is this kind of hunched over old man, and we do get to see that within the book. I thought it wrapped up the story nicely. I think it's a fun little story. This is a series that Skylar bought for me for my birthday when we started dating 5 years ago that I just now got around to finishing. So I thought this was interesting. I'd like to read more from Garth Nix, and there are more books within this series, so this is the trilogy, and then I think other books just kind of stem from that. I'm not entirely sure though. So I am looking forward to diving more into this series, but I thought this was a fun way to just wrap up the trilogy and to finally be done with a birthday present that I've had for 5 years. So overall, I read a total of 12 books. I was sitting my OWLs for the Alchemist Career Pathway. So that was a requirement to read all 12 subjects, and I did that. In total, my page count with physical books and ebooks was 1,625 pages. And then my total audiobook time was 71 hours and 26 minutes. And this month had a couple 4 stars, had a couple 2 stars, mostly 3 stars. So no surprise that my average star rating was 3.2, which is better than last month for sure. I think last month was my lowest star rating of the year so far. But I feel very accomplished with my reading this month. It's the highest number of books that I've read, but also I got to progress in more series. I had quite a few rereads, which is not normal for me, but the rereads are in order to progress in the series that I have ongoing, which is a nice feeling to be able to get through those. So I would love to know if you also participated in the OWL Magical Readathon. If you did, what career did you pursue? And I would really love to know what books you read. If we happen to read any of the same books this month, or if you've read any of these books in the past, I would just love to know your thoughts around them. So please do let me know down in the comments below, and I will chat with you there until my next video. Bye.